It is episode 106 of Decoding Fox News, and I am your host, Juliette-Jesse. Each week, I watch and analyze a whole heck of a lot of Fox News and then break it down. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to. Let's get into it. Fox News, bloodbaths, taco bowls, and the Hunter Biden nothing burger.
And in my book, which I know I haven't mentioned, it does come out tomorrow. I would like to invite Greg on my book tour so he can sell my book better than I can. And I talk about it in my book.
His brand new book that's out today.
Get yourself to the nearest bookstore.
I feel like I haven't really mentioned the book that much.
Because it is your book release day.
I did an interview for this book.
You know what I like about the book, Jesse, is, by the way, is there an audio for this book? And
I think your book will sell better than the Pope's.
Have me sign the book and take a picture.
Hey, congrats on the book.
Jesse, I heard you got a new book out. Congratulations. I appreciate how subtle you've been about selling the book.
Okay. People I interviewed for the book, come, I'll take a photo, sign a book. Congrats on your new book. Can I wear my Gutfeld shirt to your book signing? Yes. Jesse, where will the Pope be having his book signings?
Jesse, congratulations on the second day of your book.
Now we're at number 5, and we're losing to a book called Dogman, How to Catch the Easter Bunny. So I'd love for you to continue your nice, beautiful, loving support of the book. Come back and talk to us on primetime.
Put your book cover on your face.
Yes, I will lease the book cover to the county in California. I'm running around trying to sell my book, or actually go to a real bookstore. Bring the book. That wasn't a border invasion. It was people rushing to buy your new book. You should have been in the book, Jessica.
You have a book out?
The books are free, right?
And I think if you do become chief of staff, mandatory Jesse Waters books. People I interviewed for the book. Come. Well, if you read my book, you'll understand she wants carbon neutral sex toys.
But that aside, listen, this woman, it's amazing that they're trotting her back out. Of course, she's got a book to sell.
Forget about Christine Blasey Ford's book.
So this is shameless book promotion for her, but for
So that was just 1 week of Jesse Waters promoting his book. I want to put book in quotes because we all know he didn't write it. He did not write that book. There's no possible way that man wrote that book. Now, he's been promoting this book for a few months now, but he's gone into hyperdrive now that it's officially out. He's talking about, of course, Christine Blasey Ford, who, at the very end there, who's also coming out with a book. They would not be in the same category. Hers is a memoir. His is considered like a political book, which is funny for a lot of reasons. But she was on The View, and they were like, how dare she? I could just do a section. It's kind of a version of Clutch Your Pearls for this podcast called How Dare She? Or How Dare He? Because it's just, one theme on Fox. It's just constantly getting offended deeply by something that they do. It's just what they do. I just want to give a quick background to a bunch of new followers. I got a lot of new followers in the past couple of weeks due to some videos I made about Trump and a tweet I made about Judge Jeanine Pirro on Monday. There have been this crazy uptick that I did not expect. Thank you for subscribing if you're new. This podcast and this project is for the friends, family, loved ones, neighbors, coworkers of people who are obsessed with Fox. I do not think that I'm going to convert a diehard Fox fan, but I'm here to help you navigate the crazy and prevent you from getting sucked in to what's probably your relative's obsession and why they're so angry all the time. So that's just a brief breakdown. Also want to say that if you are a new subscriber, I publish a newsletter every single week along with the podcast. It's sort of the written version of the podcast. It includes hyperlinks to sources. It's a print version. Some people prefer a print version. Both will come out at the same time, pretty much in the same day, every single week. So that's just a heads up. Sometimes people don't know what they're signing up for. And I get some funny emails. Also, the podcast is about the previous week on Fox. And this week, I'm publishing hours later than I normally would because I basically stayed up all night to catch, and into the early morning, to catch Fox and Friends coverage of the bridge disaster in Baltimore because I really wanted to see how they would handle that. And then I also just got done with the 5 to see how they would handle it. And because Pete Buttigieg was right on the job kind of immediately, apparently he called in about a half hour after the accident, it was very difficult for Fox to find a way to wedge in an attack on him, which I totally expected. They tried to this morning. We'll go over that in the next week's podcast. It was very interesting how they handled that. But anyway, I kind of slept after all of that and then got up, and now we're doing this. So here we go. Fox News, bloodbaths, taco bowls, and the Hunter Biden nothing burger. Last week, Donald J. Trump said there would be a bloodbath if he was not reelected during a rally in Ohio. While most media outlets expressed alarm over his comments, Fox News declared his statement was taken out of context since it was tossed in the middle of an impromptu rant about the auto industry. The same man who said he would, quote, grab women by the pussy, end quote, off camera, and who also said at a rally, if you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you? Seriously? Okay, just knock the hell. I promise you, I'll pay for the legal fees. I promise. I promise. So this same man was suddenly a completely serious candidate who was misunderstood by an untrustworthy media. While Fox News hosts weren't screaming about media figures criticizing their glorious leader's rage-filled screeds, they were ranting about invasions at the southern border. A short clip of desperate migrants rushing a border crossing was played repeatedly on Fox News on every show I covered last week. The network attempted to hype another sleepy hearing held by the House Oversight and Accountability Committee on non-existent Biden family influence peddling. And in nearly every segment he appeared in, Jesse Waters desperately hawked his latest book, one he almost assuredly didn't write himself. Now, I'll briefly explain his book. He basically, what I know of it from what he's talked about it, is he interviewed a bunch of what he would call crazy liberals and then wrote about it. I believe that he probably did interview these people, but I don't think that he wrote this book. Typically, books like this are not written by the quote-unquote author, and there's no way he has the capacity of writing a book. No, he's dumber than bricks. He's dumber than bricks. He's dumber than the clay they use to make bricks out of. He's dumber than the molecular structure of the minerals in the clay. He's that dumb. He's dumb, 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 dumb. It's an insult to rocks to call him dumber than rocks. I'm serious. So the shows I covered last week were Fox and Friends The First Hour, The Five, and Jesse Waters Primetime. So we'll start off with the Bloodbath Freakout Meltdown. On Saturday, March 16th, during a rally in Ohio, Donald J. Trump said, this is the exact quote, "Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country." So Trump used the word bloodbath during a section of his speech about the auto industry, but given his history of using heated rhetoric and dehumanizing language, the former president faced an avalanche of criticism for his choice of words. Fox News and other right-wing media outlets pounced on Trump's critics, claiming he was taken out of context. On Monday, on The Five, Dana Perino opened the segment about what Fox called the bloodbath hoax.
It's a real bloodbath for the media's credibility. And the liberal press all teaming up to take Donald Trump completely out of context over comments the former president made about a bloodbath in the auto industry.
The whole idea of that last sound of Pelosi saying, is he going to exact a bloodbath?
And I love how the hoax toadies...
This hoax, I believe, was quicker than the Jussie Smollett hoax.
So he didn't have space to include this in the newsletter, but here is Trump from the same rally promoting an actual hoax.
A fake election that was. He ran from the basement. We got more votes than any sitting president in history, but we lost. I was told, John McLaughlin, great pollster, sir, if you get 63 million, you cannot. We got 75. We got much more than that. They report almost 75 million. They report, not 63, 75. We lost by a whisker, just a whisker, with their mail-in ballot hoaxes. And anybody that can cheat on elections the way they do if the election weren't rigged, because we didn't allow people like that into our country, we didn't welcome them, and they knew it. He asked me for an endorsement. He was an election denier, which is the right thing because the election was crooked. Although I happen to think we won most of the country, you want to know the truth. If the voting were real, I actually think we won most of the country. We better straighten out our elections. We better get smart because the people of the country are not going to take it. We're not going to take it. We're not going to take it any longer. The radical left Democrats rigged the presidential election in 2020. Not going to allow it to happen. Every time the Senate stopped, and then we had the bad election. And then we had a thing called the rigged election. We will restore free speech to our nation, and I will secure our elections. We will have fair and honest elections again. And then we had a bad election. A horrible, horrible thing happened because of COVID, but a lot of reasons, and they cheated like hell. They won't be able to do that again. They're not going to be able to do it again.
So what made that speech so unique in Ohio, and the reason why so many people have pounced on it and written articles about it, and people were so worked up about his bloodbath comment, is Trump's teleprompters were not working that day. It was very windy, and I don't know if the cables were getting pulled out of them or if he just couldn't read them because they were shaking. He kept complaining about them. You couldn't see them on camera. You could sort of see them from time to time, but most of the time you couldn't see the actual teleprompters. You could just hear him complaining about them. So he was speaking off the cuff with no script. He would go back to the script briefly, drop it, and then just start ranting. And I think that's why in this particular case, he said that the election was stolen 15 times in that speech. I know Axios, somebody from Axios, I don't like attacking other journalists. I don't know the person's name, but they wrote an article where they basically said that Trump has softened his language regarding election denialism, and I have not found that to be true at all. I think what has happened is when he's in an interview that's edited on Fox News or another media outlet that's friendly to him, and they cut it up and make him look better, I've seen the edits when he's been interviewed on Fox News. I've seen them cut right as he's about to go into election denialism. So it's very obvious that they're making him look softer, kinder, gentler than he actually is. And in Ohio, he did not have any luxury like that. He was just raw and out there. And that's why he came across as so hard. So the clip I just played from the 5 was from Monday. Jessica Tarloff, the liberal that we all love, was not on the 5 on Monday. She did return later in the week. They do rotate that chair. So on Thursday, here's what she had to say about Trump's comments about a bloodbath.
Or told him again that he had lost, that he said it would induce violence in the street. Bad things will happen, and bad things lead to other types of bad things.
It's not wrong.
2023, death and destruction if I'm charged by the Manhattan DA. 2023, after the Mar-a-Lago search in August, terrible things are going to happen. 2024, bedlam in the country if criminal charges against me are successful.
I'm not seeing an absence of bedlam.
So, of course, those quotes that Tarloff pulled are from past speeches, but we go back to the speech in Ohio. Trump opened that speech. You probably have seen the clip, but if not, I'll describe it to you. He comes out. There's this recording with this ominous music underneath it of prisoners who are either convicted or awaiting trial for crimes committed during the January 6th attack on our Capitol. They're singing the national anthem. In between stances of the national anthem, Trump has inserted himself reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, which is bizarre. And he stands there in front of this crowd in Ohio saluting. These aren't soldiers, so I don't know who you're saluting, but he's saluting this ridiculous recording. Before they played the recording, they said these hostages, again, these are people who've had due process, who had a trial by a jury of their peers, who had representation in the form of lawyers. He's calling them hostages, and he says they've been treated horribly. So that's how he starts the rally. That's how heated and out of control this is. During the rally, he used the term monster and animal to describe migrants, in addition to comparing them to snakes. And then, of course, the clip I just played you, which are some of the examples of where he said that the 2020 election was stolen. Now, I pulled the following quotes directly from the transcript. Some of them are a little awkward grammatically, but this is exactly what he said. I'm not going to play the audio of him saying this because one of the number one comments I get on all of my videos and all of pretty much everything I make, all the media I create, is people cannot stand to listen to the sound of his voice. They cannot stand this man. Now, I did think it was important to include him saying all that election denialism, but these following quotes, I'll just read them directly. So here we go. If this election is not won, I'm not sure we'll have another election again. We have to hit hard, and the reason we have to hit hard is we have to win. We have to hit our enemies hard. We don't have free speech anymore today. You speak. If they want to put you in jail today, you speak. They want to put you in jail. Even if you're telling the truth, they want to put you in jail. They're very smart, very streetwise. And I would do the same thing if I had prisons that were teeming with MS-13 and all sorts of people that they've got to take care of for the next 50 years, right? Young people, they're in jail for years. If you call them people, I don't know if you can call them people. In some cases, they're not people, in my opinion. They're sending their prisoners to see us. They're sending and bringing it right to the border, and they're dropping them off. And we're allowing them to come in. And these are tougher than anyone we've got in this country. These are hardened criminals, and we've got hundreds and thousands of them. And we're not going to take it. We're just not going to take it. They are destroying our country. I'm telling you. Again, grammatically, he's kind of a mess, but those are the exact words that he said. It's just completely outrageous that Joe Biden gets criticized for speaking in front of like a background that had red lighting on it. There was that speech that he made. They had Marines behind him, and the backdrop had blue and red lighting, but the way it was photographed, you could only see the red lighting, and they were like, "It's demonic. It's as if he's speaking from hell." And they literally made comments like that. And Trump can go, "We're going to have a bloodbath if I don't win." And people are like, "How dare you?" So this past week, a really funny thing happened in that someone who's like a follower of the account sent me an email where they said, I read this article and somebody used the phrase, "Steve Doocy goes rogue." And if you're a listener to the podcast, you know that's a regular, semi-regular segment of Steve Doocy goes rogue. I also do it for guests that go rogue. Going rogue is when somebody on Fox doesn't like necessarily stick to the script. Like they're invited to come on to talk about something and they just, they don't follow the rules. They just say, "Nope, I'm going to go against the grain. I love Joe Biden," or whatever. So somebody sends me this link claiming that somebody stole the Steve Doocy goes rogue, which you can't really steal that because I don't really trademark it. And I think it'd be absolutely ridiculous to trademark that. And, I would probably just chuckle as somebody, because I've been doing that for at least a year and a half. So that cute if you think you also came up with that. So I click on the link and it's me. The person who's quoted as saying it is me. And it's in an article by the Washington Post. What was also funny about that is I had friends like high-fiving me like, "Wow, Juliet, you got quoted in the Washington Post." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's the second time. I don't know why you didn't catch the first time. I promoted it. It's okay. I don't care. But it's the second time." So that was funny. You're hearing the cats are very active right now. I have Odin and Thor. I live in a one-room apartment, if anyone, again, is new to the podcast. So I can't stop them. We're on this ride together. And if they go in my tiny apartment, it's just part of the ambiance, the background noise, the authenticity that is Decoding Fox News. So this week, and I'm very excited about this, I have two examples of Steve Doocy goes rogue. Because he was on fire. He was on fire last week. And this first one is about the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability. They held another hearing on, and this is the exact title, "Influence Peddling, Examining Joe Biden's Abuse of Public Office." Now, this was the same tired witnesses they've had on before, except for they also added Lev Parnas, who was added on behest of the Democrats. And he basically testified that Trump was trying to get him to find all this dirt on Biden, and that Giuliani was trying to get him to find all this dirt on Biden in Ukraine, and they didn't care if the intelligence was accurate or not. And there's a lot going on there, but that's already kind of been looked into and whatnot. But that was entertaining to watch that. So it was just a bunch of nothing. And Tony Bobulinski, again, in 2020, I've talked about this before, he claimed he used to work with Hunter Biden. He got cut out of some deals, or so he feels he got cut out of some deals. So he's very bitter and angry about that. And in October of 2020, he took his emails and text messages that he claimed showed all this evidence that Joe Biden was involved in Hunter Biden's business and Joe Biden was doing all this nefarious stuff. And he brought it to the Wall Street Journal, and the Wall Street Journal said, "You've got nothing." And they actually published an article about it in October of 2020 where they basically said in the headline, in like the subheadline, it's like the headline and then the subheadline was like, "Business associate of Hunter Biden has nothing," basically. I'm paraphrasing. That's basically what they said. That did not deter Tony Bobulinski. He still insists he's got this hard evidence. The FBI won't take him seriously. Nobody cares except for James Comer and these Republicans like Jim Jordan who like want to take Biden down. So they had him on. He was like the star witness, and it was just a snooze fest. But there was one heated exchange between Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez and Bobulinski, where they were fighting over, she was like, name the specific, I'm going to paraphrase. She's just like, name the specific crime, name the specific crime. And he sort of just muddled an answer, and he said, corruption statutes, RICO, and conspiracy FARA. Now, she was asking specifically what crimes Joe Biden had committed. FARA is especially hilarious because that's Foreign Agents Registration Act. That would be saying that Joe Biden was somehow a foreign agent for another country and he didn't tell the U.S. government that he was working for another country. That would be a FARA violation. I don't know how on earth Joe Biden could handle that, but okay. Because it basically sounded like when Bobulinski rattled off corruption statutes, RICO, conspiracy, and FARA, he was really talking about Hunter Biden. But that's not the question he was asked. AOC asked him about Joe Biden. So when he said RICO, Ocasio-Cortez pounced on that and she said, RICO is not a crime, it's a category of crime. Probably because it was like a heated exchange and she was all worked up. Fox News thought that clip was like incredibly incriminating to AOC, which it wasn't. And they kept playing it on every show. They're like, oh, look how dumb she is. Ha, 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 ha. RICO's a crime. Well, this is a great example of Fox News hosts having absolutely no clue what RICO is.
And to see that there's a prosecution that is going on currently against Donald Trump. I mean, it is the Democrats' signature charge against the former president of the United States. And to have a sitting member of Congress get up there and not be aware of what RICO is, but other laws that he presented to her.
RICO is corruption. RICO is racketeering.
Yep.
It stands for Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. It's people who are dishonest in business, and that's what they're accusing Donald Trump of. They're saying that he was corrupt by trying to influence elections in 2020.
Right. RICO is an act. And essentially what it does is it's a federal law that makes it easier to charge a whole bunch of people for one thing. And then that can include dozens of actual crimes. It could be murder, it could be racketeering, it could be gambling, it could be conspiracy. And I think at one point Tony Bobulinski did point to it. Yeah, he mentioned conspiracy.
So the only person who was close to answering that correctly was Steve Doocy. I am not an expert on RICO crimes, but it's no one single person could commit a RICO crime since it requires a group of people acting together in a conspiracy to commit a crime or a series of crimes. So AOC is kind of right where she said it's not a crime, it's a category of crime. This one's tricky because I guess you could, one person could get charged with RICO, but it would, again, you'd have to involve a larger group of people. And this is not that. Even with all the goofy theories they keep coming up with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, there's no evidence whatsoever that there was some sort of like organized crime ring here, which is basically what they're trying to do. Now, in the case of the RICO charges against Trump in Georgia, he was charged with multiple other individuals who, according to the charges levied against them, worked together to try to overthrow the outcome of the 2020 election in that state. Now, normally RICO charges are brought against groups involved with illegal gambling, murder, kidnapping, extortion, arson, robbery, bribery, dealing in obscene matter, or dealing in a controlled substance. But the RICO law in Georgia is far more expansive than the federal law, which is one reason why Fulton County DA Fani Willis was able to charge Trump and his alleged co-conspirators with RICO charges. Now, I can't see inside AOC's mind, but my guess is this is what she was thinking, because this is sort of what makes sense to me. Like, if you think about assault, robbery, Grand Theft Auto, shoplifting, identity theft, those are specific crimes. Just, that's all you need, that one label of a crime. But RICO usually comes with an explanation of what the RICO was involved with, because it is conspiracy. It involves a conspiracy of a group of people acting together to commit a crime. In the case of Georgia, RICO is standing for a group of people trying to overthrow a free and fair election in that state. So they were all working together, which is where the RICO comes from and why they all got charged together. So it's very specific. And the fact that Tony Bobulinski just said RICO about Joe Biden with nothing to back it up was just kind of proof of why he has no idea what he's talking about. So this next clip is also Steve Doocy goes rogue, but it's later in the episode, and I just called it the Doocy is a wet blanket for the impeachment inquiry, which again is part of this ridiculous committee hearing that was incredibly boring, except for when you got to see some of our superstar Democrats crushing it. That was the only highlights, but here you go.
Show up. Why didn't Hunter show up? He kept saying, I want a public hearing.
He wanted to.
Hunter didn't show up. Devin Archer didn't show up because his attorney said he was not notified. He didn't have enough time to proceed and prepare. So yesterday was a big day for the committee. Let's see where it goes from here. Right now, I was reading in Axios, apparently they don't have the votes for impeachment on the Republican side. It sounds like they could wind up just simply taking their stack of stuff that they have assembled over the last number of months, giving it to the Department of Justice.
They want the president to testify.
And then just
the big news is they want the president.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're inviting the president to come testify.
Right.
That's the news that's coming out of this.
Right. I think we heard yesterday from the White House that that is unlikely. But nonetheless, it sounds like they will try to get a criminal referral for the stuff that they presented in the committee from the Department of Justice. But then again, it's Joe Biden's Department of Justice. Will something happen?
Well, if it's anything
tuned.
like the deal that they gave his son until a federal judge shut it down, I don't anticipate them being fair.
So Lawrence Jones' comment right there is pretty funny, since Hunter Biden is currently being prosecuted by the Department of Justice on tax and gun charges. So, okay, Lawrence Jones, tell yourself that he's not. I also think it's very funny that during the hearing, the 6.5-hour hearing, Fox News got brought up 9 times, which is nutty. So even one of the witnesses that the Democrats brought in, Lev Parnas, he was the man who was hired to go to Ukraine and dig up dirt on Joe Biden. And he basically said, that was during the Trump administration, he basically said, I would go over there, I'd find some information. I didn't know if it was any good or not. I'd give it to John Solomon. John Solomon is a regular on Fox News, and I would hear it on Fox News that night. It wasn't vetted, it wasn't checked. It was just, that's what was happening. And that Rudy Giuliani was doing, the same thing, and that yada, yada, yada. So he kept mentioning Fox News and specifically Sean Hannity, which was interesting. I made a clip of that, put that on Twitter. So since I'm about halfway through this, I should give a shout out to my sponsor. If you're new to the podcast, who is that sponsor? That would be the listeners to this podcast and readers of my Substack channel. I have no large donor. I have no large sponsor. I have no advertisers. I might eventually get advertisers, but I'm not there yet. So that's it. There's nobody pulling my strings. No one owns me. No one tells me what to do. I work for my readers and listeners. If you want to become a paid subscriber, you go to my Substack channel for Decoding Fox News, my Patreon for Decoding Fox News, and all paid subscribers and paid supporters get exclusive content. And if you can't afford to sponsor Decoding Fox News, that's perfectly fine. Share the podcast, share the newsletter. That helps tremendously. I also want to give a shout out to a pair of listeners. I always just use first names for privacy reasons. Anne and Pete, who bought something from the Decoding Fox News Amazon wish list. It was just some snacks. It's always appreciated. I also have cat food. It used to have like a bunch of office stuff for the podcast, but that all got bought up immediately. And now it is cat food. and snacks. So I also had coffee on there, which people bought that up immediately. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I make a humble living doing this. It is getting better. I will confess, because I told one person who is a paid subscriber this last week. This project got started when I graduated from grad school, got my master's, my capstone, which was very similar to this project. Somebody from my school, Jeff Jarvis, really liked my capstone. He said, I can get you a grant. You can do this as a job, but you have to do it about Fox News. Would you be willing to do that? I said, let's do this. And so that's how Decoding Fox News was born. And that grant was for 18 months. And then when that grant ran out, I was just living off Substack income. I had a big spike right at the end of the grant, thanks to Greg Gutfeld coming at me personally on Twitter. That actually caused a huge spike in everything. But that was just temporary. And then for about 3 months, I put myself on a very, very strict budget. My income did not meet my budget. I was just at or below my budget. And I was a little scared, but I kept seeing the number of subscribers go up every single month. So I hung in there and I said, it's going to work out. It's going to work out. Just hang in there. And I had saved a bunch of money from the grant, so I was okay financially. And I can say now, I didn't want to tell anybody this, so I had 3 negative months there. So far in 2024, every single month has been positive. So I'm making more than my budget, and that is tremendous. And I thank you so much. So back to the podcast. Now, this next clip is from Thursday from the 5. And this was involving a clip that Fox kept showing multiple days, multiple shows. It was a brief clip that showed migrants somehow they'd broken through the razor wire. I believe they were already on U.S. soil, but they were running up to another gate, an actual gate in El Paso. And there were some scuffles with some Border Patrol agents and what looked like it was Texas National Guard. Now, the guards were all armed. None of the migrants were armed. So it wasn't very pleasant, but it was very brief. And this enormous gate that looks like it was permanent, because we've always had fencing and gates at high traffic areas of the border. That's not new. The concept of putting a wall across the entire southern border was Trump's stupid idea. But we've always had gates and checkpoints basically at the border where a lot of people come through, and this was one of them. And basically what happened is these migrants ran past the razor wire. There was some light scuffling, and then they got blocked by a pretty oppressive door, and they couldn't get past it. It was basically a giant fence. They couldn't get past it. And it looked pretty, not a great sight, but again, nobody got hurt. One person was arrested. That was it. Now, Fox took this short clip and played it over and over and over again, kept using the term invasion. And this was Judge Jeanine, her response to it. Now, before they played this, they also played what appeared to be a migrant who was speaking in Spanish from TikTok. And he was saying basically like, I found out that if you go into an abandoned home and just live there, you can claim it for yourself. It's not really how the law works. And he was basically misinterpreting squatters' rights, and those vary wildly from state to state. And he was like, I'm going to show you how to do this. This is what I'm going to do. There's no proof that he'd done it. The guy, they've used his clips before. He says outrageous things on TikTok all the time. It's kind of what his whole shtick is. And of course, Fox News took this as, this is a whole movement. Migrants going to take over. And this was how Judge Jeanine kind of combined everything.
We let them in and we say they're on parole. That's baloney. They're not on parole, because if you're on parole, your parole officer knows where you are every minute. So they don't know where they are. They're gone. So, of course, they can't give them an NTA notice to appear. That's why nobody's appearing. They don't get the notice because nobody knows where they are in the first place. This is basically the destruction of civilization. It's the elimination of borders. It's the creation of a globalist landing spot where people are not happy to be here. They're demanding that they be here, that they be accommodated with homes, and they're going to look for your home to enter. And the laws in the United States and all 50 states, Dana, allow squatters to have rights. Amazing. It's just a question of 30 days or more than 30 days of your intentionally intending to make this your permanent resident. Here's a bottom line. If these legislators in the states or Congress want to pass a law to give American citizens their right of ownership, they can eliminate all of this squatter nonsense because they're not tenants, they're trespassers. And more than that, they're burglars.
So if you're new to the podcast, I, on pretty much a regular basis, do impressions of people. And one of them is, I'm Judge Jeanine. And you may not realize it, but I have already pulled back several feet away from my microphone. Yet, I can look at the sound wave and I'm blowing it out. I'm going to have to go back at the end of this recording and pull the levels down. Why? Because I'm loud. And every time I post about Judge Jeanine, people make jokes about boxes of wine, and I have no idea why. There's a very specific rhythm to the way she speaks, and she's happy. Sometimes she goes, I'm happy. She eats Oreo cookies, York peppermint patties. She talks about her dogs. She drives an Escalade. I know more about this woman than I probably know about half my neighbors. I'm serious. So, yeah. Judge Jeanine, ladies and gentlemen, Judge Jeanine. Whoo! She had some snappy outfits this week, though. Some snappy little... I love her clothes. Her clothes and her shoes are nails. Absolute nails. She says horrible things, but there's times when I'm like, those shoes are on point, and I bet they're like a size 5. I've worn a size 10 since I was 11, so I'm a monster Viking, and I just go, wow, what is that like to be petite? You're so... My mother's petite. My mother's like Judge Jeanine size. Like itty bitty. Pick her up and throw her. Now this next clip is equally absolutely bonkers. And I had fun. I had a lot of fun researching this one. So this is Jesse Waters talking about why Trump understands the Latino community.
The meds look like they were off from the State of the Union pills. The man is basically running on fumes. One word, actually two, Judge, taco bowls. Donald Trump sells taco bowls. They're the greatest taco bowls you've ever eaten. I've tried them. They're delicious. Does Joe Biden sell taco bowls? No. His family thinks Mexican Americans are tacos, but if you read between the lines about what that statement said, he said, Trump hates you and you like me because I'm Irish.
That clip is one of the craziest clips I've ever heard on Fox News. And that's saying a lot because I've heard a lot. Taco bowls. What on earth are you talking about, Jesse Waters? So, taco bowls are a Mexican-inspired American dish. And I know this because I looked it up because I'm a nerd. The first taco bowl was invented sometime during the 1950s by an American, Elmer Doolin. Does that sound like a Mexican to you? Could be. Technically could be. But Elmer Doolin, the founder of Fritos. And the first taco bowls were called Tacups and were sold at the Fritos restaurant in Disneyland. According to the Pew Research Center, Mexican Americans make up 34% of recent Hispanic immigrant population. Another 36% of recent Hispanic immigrants to the U.S. are Guatemalan, Honduran, Dominican, or Venezuelan. They don't eat taco bowls. Mexicans don't eat taco bowls. What are you talking about? So I'm not sure why the fact that one of Trump's own restaurants includes taco bowls on its menu would have any connection to his relationship with Latino Americans. It has none. Now, this next clip, none. It's just the dumbest thing he's ever said. One of the dumbest things. And he says dumb things all the time. Like, was it supposed to be a joke? Because it landed flat. And I have no idea. I just sat back going, I cannot. Wow. Fail up, kids. Fail up. Just be a white male with charisma and a good head of hair. And you too, if you're smug enough, can have a career on Fox News. So next up, taco bowls. Anyway, I'm still, I don't even know how to process that clip. I still am stunned by how stupid it was. This next clip was Brian Brenberg, who's normally of Fox Business, just making up economic theories to trash a student loan forgiveness program. So last week, President Biden announced a new program that would forgive $5.8 billion worth of student loans for 78,000 public sector workers who've been making payments for the last 10 years. That's a very specific group. So you had to have been making payments for the last 10 years. So that's a lot of interest these people have been paying into their student loans. And there's only 78,000 of them, and you have to work in the public sector. So on Friday, while a guest on Fox and Friends, Brian Brenberg, made this statement.
It's like he's just buying votes.
Timing is everything. You promise the relief, you start giving it. You know people are going to sue you for this because the Supreme Court has said you can't do it. But he's doing it in this piecemeal way.
Right.
You know, he's taking a program and driving a Mack truck through it to shovel money out to people.
Sure.
It's going to take a while for the courts to say, no, you can't. And by that time, November 2024 has already happened. It's very cynical. And as you brought up, it's an inflationary kind of thing. It makes prices worse for people. And so it hits people in all sorts of ways.
Right.
Okay, I'm not an economist, but there's no possible way that a program that only includes 78,000 Americans would have much of an effect on the national economy. What Biden is doing is he's expanding pre-existing programs. He changed the income repayment program that's now called SAVE. It's incredible. It cut my payment by 2/3. I mean, it was dramatic because it basically goes off what you're paying, and if you pay into SAVE for 20 years, your whatever you have left is forgiven. You have to make payments the whole time. You have to be in the system. If you lose your job and you have zero payments, that's fine. But you have to be in the system. You have to be in communication with the Department of Education the whole time. But after 20 years, it's supposed to be forgiven. So I'm just going to point out that the average student loan payment is around $500 a month. The public sector workers who will qualify this program will not get a check for whatever amount they own on their loans. They will just now have approximately $500 a month they can spend on something else besides their student loan debt. The United States population is roughly 330 million people, with about 258.3 million over the age of 18. So that's 258 million adults. The civilian workforce amounts to about 166 million adults. A group of 78,000 Americans would account for 0.3% of the total adult population and 0.4% of the adult workforce. That is not going to cause inflation. If the Biden administration infused $6 billion worth of cash into the economy, perhaps that might, although our economy is enormous, so I don't even think that would do it. Giving stimulus checks to every American for $1,400, yes, that could cause inflation. And it probably did, along with the supply chain disasters and the fact that cash was being infused into economies all over the world at the same time because of COVID. Now, on the flip side, and he'd never talk about this, but on the flip side, had governments not basically paid people to stay at home who couldn't work, I couldn't work, a lot of people completely lost their income. Had governments allowed millions of people to just go bankrupt, again, you could have what we had in the Great Depression, where entire sectors of the economy failed and collapsed, and that would cause a domino effect because everything's interconnected. So if you had the entire tourism, industry collapse, that would cause all kinds of problems in banking because all of these, hotels would go belly up and all the restaurants would go belly up, and that would cause problems with food and suppliers, and you'd have problems that would just start to snowball throughout the economy. So the next section is stories Fox News ignored. Every week I compare the hours I've watched on Fox News to 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. The following stories were covered on PBS NewsHour but not on Fox. Now these stories were as of Friday, March 22nd, 2024. Some big stuff happened on Monday, so if you're wondering why I'm not mentioning that, it's because the cutoff is Friday. Updates in the Israel-Hamas war. A UN-backed report found that nearly 1 million people in Gaza are grappling with extreme hunger, and Palestinians in North Gaza could face famine as soon as May. In central Gaza, 28 people were killed due to 3 separate Israeli airstrikes. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, the total death toll in Gaza so far has reached 32,000 people. The agency does not differentiate between civilian and combatant deaths. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke virtually to Republican senators in a closed-door meeting. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York rejected a request for Netanyahu to address the Senate Democratic caucus. Schumer said it would not be helpful to Israel to have these discussions in a partisan manner. Updates in the war in Ukraine. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, speaking in Germany at the 20th meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group at Ramstein Air Base, Germany, said that the U.S. remains committed to supporting Ukraine despite additional military funding that is stalled in Congress. Debris from a Russian missile attack in Kyiv wounded at least 10 people. The Ukrainian Air Force said it shot down 2 ballistic missiles that were shot from Russian-occupied Crimea. The European Union has devised a plan to use profits from frozen Russian assets to help pay for military support in Ukraine. Under the EU plan, 97% of profits generated from assets seized during the start of the war would go to Ukraine. 1 million people lost power in Ukraine after the Russian military attacked the civilian electrical grid. At least 5 people were killed and 14 wounded during the assault. On to the regular news, PBS produced a segment about federal housing assistance programs. Unlike other social safety net programs that continue to expand, federal housing assistance has shrunk to its lowest level in 25 years, even as homelessness and rental prices have hit historic highs. President Biden announced a new program to help working families lower their housing costs. The plan includes mortgage relief credits and down payment assistance for first-generation homeowners. The National Institute of Health found no evidence of brain injuries or biological abnormalities with Havana syndrome. The NIH acknowledged the severity of the symptoms related to the mysterious illness. The Environmental Protection Agency announced a comprehensive ban on asbestos. It is still found in products such as brake linings and gaskets and is also used to manufacture chlorine bleach and sodium hydroxide, also known as caustic soda. The Supreme Court weighed the National Rifles Association free speech case against a former New York regulator during oral arguments last week. During an interview last Monday, former President Donald J. Trump said that Jews who vote for Democrats hate Israel and hate their religion, sparking harsh criticism from the White House and Jewish leaders. A new national security law in Hong Kong gives the Chinese government more power to crack down on dissent. Critics say the law would further erode the city's autonomy and lead to more abuses on civil liberties. 2 Mississippi police deputies received long prison sentences for their role in breaking into a home with 4 other white officers and torturing 2 black men. U.S. District Judge Tom Lee sentenced Christian Dedman, 29, to 40 years in prison, and Daniel O'Pike, 28, to 17 and a half years. A new study by the United Nations International Labor Organization found a 37% increase in illegal profits from forced labor since 2014. Former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro was formally accused Tuesday of falsifying his COVID-19 vaccination status, marking the first indictment for the embattled far-right leader, with more allegations potentially in store. The record-breaking heating of the world's oceans enters its 2nd year in a row, alarming climate scientists. Experts explored a link to El Niño, the climate pattern known for warming up the Pacific Ocean, but nothing could explain the dramatic increase in temperatures. Federal Reserve officials decided to keep interest rates steady for the moment, but they say they expect to make 3 rate cuts in 2024. The Congressional Budget Office's latest long-term budget and economic outlook report projects publicly held debt to reach 166% of gross domestic product, or GDP, in 2054. That's down from an earlier budget projection that predicted 181% of economic activity in 2053. More than 230 Americans were airlifted out of Haiti via helicopter last week. The State Department agency reiterated that U.S. citizens should not travel to Haiti and should depart the country when transportation options are available and it's safe to do so. Former President Donald J. Trump said that he would support a national ban on abortion after 15 weeks in a pregnancy. This is the first time he's voiced a specific limit on the procedure. President Joe Biden announced a plan to provide $8.5 billion in grants and loans to Intel under the CHIPS and Science Act to help the company build and expand semiconductor facilities in Arizona, Ohio, New Mexico, and Oregon. Richard Higgins, one of the last remaining survivors who witnessed the Japanese surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, has died at the age of 102. On that day, 2,403 U.S. personnel, including 68 civilians, were killed by the airstrike. The U.S. declared war on Japan and entered World War II soon after the attack. By a razor-thin margin, California voters have approved a measure that will impose strict requirements on counties to spend on housing and drug treatment programs to tackle the state's homelessness crisis. Some 1,100 World War II soldiers who served in the so-called Ghost Army were honored last week. During the war, they belonged to units that specialized in trickery to outwit the Germans. Their methods include inflatable tanks, sound effects, and phony radio transmissions. Thursday, 3 of the 7 known surviving members accepted the Congressional Gold Medal. Arizona State Senator Eva Birch shared her own personal story about needing an abortion to terminate a wanted pregnancy that is not viable. In order to access care in the state, Birch said that she had to have an invasive transvaginal ultrasound that she did not need. Dartmouth tells the National Labor Relations Board that student basketball players are not employees. The team voted to unionize earlier this month. A new study found that suicide rates among tank brigades are highest in the U.S. military. Since 9/11, more than 30,000 active duty service members or veterans of post-9/11 wars have died by suicide. That is more than 4 times the number of those who've died in combat. President Biden's nomination of the first Muslim American to a federal appeals court appears to be in peril. Adil Manji is a veteran litigator unanimously rated well qualified by the American Bar Association, but he's faced attacks from Republican senators. The White House calls it an Islamophobic smear campaign. Richard Slayman, 62, of Westmouth, Massachusetts, who's suffering from an end-stage kidney disease, was the first human patient to receive a genetically modified pig kidney transplant. A new study published by JAMA, Journal for the American Medical Association, showed that the mortality rate among renters who faced eviction was twice as high than expected during the first 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic. And those are all the stories. That was a lot of them. I actually had to cut a few kind of weird ones out of there because I just didn't have the space. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Every week it's a lot. Doesn't matter how many hours I watch of Fox. So by the numbers, every week I compare the top 5 topics on Fox to the top 5 topics on the PBS NewsHour. We're going to start with Fox. 12% border crisis, 9% Trump's legal problems, Biden bashing 8%, 7% was the bloodbath Trump hoax, and 5% was Fox promotion that was Jesse hawking his book. That's why I included it at the top. PBS NewsHour, 9% was number 1 for artist profile, which is where they profile an artist. 8% Israel-Hamas war. 8% government shutdown looming. Fox did mention that, but just barely. 6% Putin wins re-election. They did a whole segment on how Putin rules Russia with an iron fist. And 4% Hong Kong Chinese government crackdown on dissent. For the words used on Fox for the week ending March 24th, 2024, Trump, 409 times, Biden, 362, border, 152, crime, 85, Hunter, 55, inflation, 26, economy, 25, Israel, only 22 times, China, 22 times, AOC, 13, squatting, 6, spending bill, twice. Like I said, they mentioned it, but barely. And then 2 things that they didn't mention directly were Iran and government shutdown. They didn't actually use the phrase government shutdown. They did sort of talk about it. It's weird. If you'd like to get more from Decoding Fox News, I post constantly on X, also known as Twitter. I call it Twitter. You can find me on Threads, Blue Sky, although they don't let me do video yet, so not much on that. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook. You can also find this podcast on YouTube, if you'd like, on the Resolute Square channel. I'm loosely affiliated with them. They're great. They're helping me promote. And also, if you want to become a paid subscriber, go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News, Patreon for Decoding Fox News. The podcast mascots, Odin and Thor, they are 2 cats. One is a tuxedo. His name is Thor. He's tiny. He's crazy. The other one is a mama's boy. He's sweet. He's sensitive. He's emotional. His name's Odin. He's long and he's black. They're best buddies. They're my best friends. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you at the next podcast.
Thank you all for coming to my one-woman show. It's nice to meet you. Will we meet again?
Resolute Square.